In the world of vintage watches and watch auctions, you often hear about Patek and Rolex watches fetching astronomical prices. So what will be the next hot thing? And what are the criteria so important for the different collectors? Let's find out with 3 experts on the matter.
I think the next hot thing can be a brand or a model. And we will get there in a moment. I think there's also a trend in regards to style across brands, across periods.
You have these up-and-comers that have a lot of rich history. There's books about these brands.
Universal, Tudor, I'm thinking of maybe Breitling and Longines.
We have seen also an incredible interest on vintage timepieces, like for example the famous Autavia, not only the Monaco, but the early models made by these sport brands. The collectors are always looking for quality, for rarity, not only for big brands.
I think many collectors would rather have a mint, all original Heuer than a poorly polished, badly restored Patek, Audemars ou Vacheron Constantin. So it's not about just the brand and the model, it's about how's the watch preserved. How rare is it? Where does it come from? What is the condition?
Eberhard, kind of, one that pops into mind. Is a brand that has a huge following. There's literature on the brand, and so it's a brand that has a potential to pop. Every brand that has this potential has some attribute which makes it unique and special. So you take, for example, Longines. Longines in the 40s and 50s with the 13ZN and then after the 30CH movements were considered to, or are considered even today, to be the finest chronograph movements in Swiss watchmaking. And it even goes into like the small niche brands like a Nivada Grenchen, something that most people haven't even heard of. There is also a following for this brand. There's a lot of discussion on forums. Why? Because in the 50s they made these amazing little diver watches. In the 60s there was these aviator chronographs. An amazing brand that's disappeared, but yet has a wonderful story. And so it's a lot of fun to collect these brands because there's a lot to capture.
We have some references made by Movado in the 40s that basically they had the same suppliers of Patek Philippe. So we have cases, pushers, dials, indexes that were made exactly by the same producer, the same supplier than Patek Philippe. So if you talk about quality, it's exactly the same. Tissot watches right now, we have beautiful examples that have surfaced in the market, especially monopusher chronographs with stainless steel case and black dials. Right now, also the diameter is extremely attractive because we are talking about 30 millimeters cases. They are extremely attractive, and we have seen a specific market going for these models.
I think the reason to own and to chase a vintage watch is in fact to have something vintage. And if a vintage watch is half rebuilt with new parts and restored, the purpose is no longer given. It's like you drink a 40-year-old Bordeaux, but you know that half of it is a younger wine that is mixed. You don't have the pure pleasure anymore.
We drive a lot more on emotion, and I always use the parallel of a vintage car. So a vintage car has no Bluetooth, has no power steering, has sometimes no air conditioning. A lot of the features that we've come to love in a car has none of that. But you step behind the wheel and there's a feeling that you get which is unparalleled.
If the best you can afford is a Tissot, Heuer, Oris, Doxa for 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 francs, then rather buy an extremely attractive example of that brand than a completely beaten up Rolex or Patek Philippe that I think will not even gain value with time, but possibly even lose.
We have never to forget the ladies' watches. Of course, I'm a big fan, a big lover of the Piaget ones made especially in the 60s and the 70s when we have ladies' bracelet, when the design exploded, when artists were called by the manufacturer to design new ladies' watches. Of course, they are also piece of art, they are piece unique. And we have seen also in the last years the interest growing for these pieces And of course, sequentially, the price at the auction also have grown in a sensitive way.
People know what they're doing now. 30 years ago, as long as it was good looking, we bought it. But now, there's so much knowledge that people only want to pick the nicest, most honest examples for their collections.